This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. This is Ray, your host, and tonight we are talking about reading and literacy in secondary schools, and specifically the problem that so many of us are facing when students look at books as if they're carrying some contagious disease. So, how can we fix this? We'll discuss now.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So good evening or good morning or good afternoon, whenever you happen to be listening. We are talking about literacy and reading specifically in secondary schools tonight because it's so important and it's so frustrating when things are not going according to plan and our students do not appreciate the value of literacy and do not love books the way that I suppose most teachers do, particularly myself as an English teacher in a secondary school. It's extremely frustrating to see that love of stories and of independent reading that so many students, so many young people have when they're small children fizzle every year that they get older. And then particularly, again, in my subject and other subjects that have very text-heavy content, it becomes a bigger and bigger problem for them as they get closer to their exams. How can they possibly do well in their exams if they won't expand their minds by reading what is required and also practicing those reading skills on their own? It's a big issue, and in my daily life, it's a particularly significant issue as an English teacher who's trying to encourage students to actually like what they're doing. And I feel that oftentimes the more we force it on them, the less they enjoy it, and the more backlash there is and the more negative the view of reading becomes. So our guest tonight is the reading coordinator at my school, Lauren, and she's also a history teacher. So she's also teaching a subject that is word heavy, and she's in charge of literacy across the whole school and developing the importance of that and how we can try and get these kids to pick up a book and actually maybe enjoy it and appreciate the value of what they're doing. So if this is of particular interest to listeners and you're listening before 7:30 on Tuesday, the 21st of May, there's also another show on Teachers Talk Radio at 7:30 about the necessity of reading to open up the curriculum. And that's, I think, probably a little bit more general and a bit more, well, to be honest, I'm not sure. I think you should just listen in and find out for yourself. But that's 7:30 on Tuesday, the 21st on Teachers Talk Radio. Reading Solutions UK will be on to talk about how it is necessary. Reading is absolutely necessary for everything that we do in schools. So they'll be discussing this again tomorrow night. So, Lauren, I see you have joined. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Lovely. I can hear you. This is excellent. So we work at a comprehensive secondary school in the East Midlands, and I only joined in September. So everything I'm seeing that you are running in the school is new to me. I mean, some things that we do I've seen done before in my previous schools and in other schools. But why don't you give us a really brief rundown of your role within the school as it pertains to reading and literacy?
Sure. So this is only my second year in the role, and it was originally part of the second English role job aspect when I originally started at school 3 years ago now, but they decided to split it. because they thought that it
Okay.
needed a bit more of a focus, that just English necessarily at the time didn't have to give.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted to make it more school wide. So it's not like, oh, literacy is just an English thing. So only
Yeah.
English teachers need to worry about it. And I think that's why it was quite good that I personally went for the role, because I am a history teacher. So that is quite an academic and very word heavy subject, and a lot of tier 3 vocabulary as well.
Mm-hmm.
But additionally to that, I actually started at our school as a maths teacher. Um,
Ah.
yeah, so I've actually got the understanding of a subject that you don't think that is traditionally literacy based, but there
Yeah.
is so much reading. Like the average age of a maths paper is like a 16, 17 years old.
Wow.
So you've got to have
Yeah.
quite a high reading age to be able to access the maths. So it doesn't matter whether you can actually do the basic maths. If you can't read, you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I know this is
sorry.
slightly off topic, but no, I'm just intrigued. How did you move from maths to history?
So sorry, I always laugh when people ask this because I don't think it's that weird, but everyone's always so surprised by it. Um,
Yeah.
Basically, I done my degree and my master's in history.
Hmm.
So naturally, I decided to train as a history teacher.
Yeah.
But to open up options and stuff, I wanted to do a bit of maths alongside that. So mainly in my
Yeah.
NQT year, I did a bit of maths training, just to like open doors for myself, because I knew history, there's not a lot of jobs going. Like there's a surplus of history teachers in
Yeah.
regards to other subjects.
Yeah.
And I did all of that down in Kent, and then I moved up to the Midlands to be with my partner.
Hmm.
And just so happened the first job going was the maths job at our
Right.
school, and I was just like, oh, that's fine, it's only until December. And then it happened to keep going until July. And while I was
Fair enough.
there, a history job appeared, so I was like, yep, I'm definitely going back to history.
But I love that you have that perspective because you've been in one of these word heavy subjects, and you've also been on the side of one of those stereotypically, for all the reasons you just said, not literacy heavy subjects, and you can see the full picture in a way that I think the average English teacher would struggle to appreciate, which I suppose is probably part of the reason they wanted to split the role in the first place. Because we do tend to be quite I don't want to say protective, but we tend to be a little bit insular when it comes to things like literacy and language and words and reading. We tend to think of our own, as English teachers, we tend to think of our own department first as leading that. But as you said, it's not the job of the English department to teach literacy and encourage reading. That is a full school job. It is the job of every teacher to teach literacy. And as you said, even in maths, is it really 16? Is that really the age?
Yeah, it is
That
quite
is
high.
mind-boggling.
um,
Yeah, that's
and yeah, when you think of some of the reading ages that we come across, especially
yeah,
even going into Key Stage 4, I'm assuming it's quite a national thing as well. It's quite
yeah.
scary. Like, slightly different subject, but geography, for instance, they actually need to be 17, which is technically a year older than
Wow.
what they are when they're sitting it, vocabulary
Yep,
wise.
yep.
And it's just scary to think that that is what we're assessing them on. Like, not only are we
It,
assessing on their knowledge, but actually, can they actually read it to even attempt it?
I don't know why I find this so crazy because I'm thinking about the texts that we teach in English for GCSE, and so many of the texts on the options that we can choose are incredibly difficult. I'm thinking about Dr.
Mm.
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you I have to. I mean, I don't anymore because I know it. But the first few times I read it, I had to do it with my phone out on dictionary.com because like there are words in there that most
Yeah, you
adults would
just,
not know. And
yeah, it's
yeah, it's
really
just
interesting.
it is. So what drew you to apply for the reading coordinator role after teaching maths and then teaching history in the school? What was it about this position that caught your eye?
So I am super passionate about reading, um, and I probably have been since I was in secondary school myself, largely because I'm dyslexic.
Okay.
I'm like severely dyslexic, and I've always really struggled a bit. And I didn't get diagnosed until just before my GCSEs, so I always just thought I was bad at English. That's how it came across. Anyway,
Yeah.
and then I got his diagnosis and I was a bit like, oh, it makes sense now. But
Yeah.
I just noticed such a correlation with my ability to write and speak and read generally, and everything is so much improved the more I read. So I absolutely
Yeah.
love reading, and I really notice the difference when like I've gone days without being able to pick up a book to compare
Yeah.
to what I'm able to spell and deal with when I have. And I'm
Yeah.
just really passionate about kids being able to read no matter what. Like my favorite thing is at the start of the academic year when a kid plays the dyslexic card, I call it. And I'm like, that is not going to work with me, I'm afraid. You can't play that card.
And I know so many dyslexic teachers that are in a similar position, and they love whipping that out. They absolutely love it. They
It's
don't
so
even try
fun.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't try it with
But
me.
also, but also you're in such a good position from personal experience to help students with similar
Yeah,
barriers and similar unfortunately negative experiences when it comes to reading books, which really should be an incredibly pleasurable, joyous, relaxing fill in the blank activity.
yeah,
and for them to think, like, to get it in their heads that this is something that they just can't do because it is a little bit, well, it's a lot more difficult for a lot of people, and they can struggle with it. For you to be able to provide that, emotional validation, but also, I'm assuming, practical advice, that's a really valuable thing to have on staff for the kids.
yeah, and that's
So
what I aim to do and stuff. And also, I just want like another thing is just to make sure kids are aware that like reading isn't something that everyone's just naturally good at. Like even as an
mhm.
adult, we still struggle. Like we don't know
Yeah.
every single word. Like there's been times when, especially reading words, superfluous comes to mind. I particularly read
Yeah.
it as superfluous. And I remember having a
Yeah.
conversation with the SLT lead that's our like my link for reading, and he was like, "What do you think this word is?" And I was like, "Superfluous," and he was like, "What?" And he was like, "Even my year 11s know how to say that." And I was like, "Well, great, but that looks like superfluous to me."
Yeah, good for them, but it's not to me. But and again, that's also so important. The more, I feel like, the more students are aware that this reading isn't something that just like magically happens at a certain age, or some people are just naturally good and some people are naturally bad, the more they realize that actually adults can struggle with this too, either because they're dyslexic or because they've got ADHD and they find it difficult to focus, or they focus too much, or you don't have any of those particular barriers, but for one reason or another, you find it difficult, or you're constantly needing to look up words. Like, the more they realize this, I feel like the more they'll accept the challenges that come with it, rather than seeing it as from the, internalized self-loathing perspective of, oh, this is something that I cannot do. So I think constantly sharing what is working well and the books we're enjoying and what we like doing, as well as the potential challenges we face, is really, really important. And like, I've been teaching for 14 years, and I genuinely could not care less what the average 15-year-old thinks of me. So I have absolutely no qualms about misspelling something on the board and going, oops, or does anyone remember how to spell this? Or
So
one sec, I need Google.
I do it all the time. I'll underline
Yeah.
if I write something on the board and I'm like, I don't know if that's right. I'll underline it, and I'll say to the kids, if I underline something, let me check it
Get a
before you copy
dictionary.
it,
Yeah.
because I'm not sure.
or
Or I'll
or
ask
I'll
them how to spell it.
Yeah, and the kids that sit in the back corner near the shelves, they know that it's entirely possible at some point in the lesson I'll be like, right, you grab the dictionary, look this up, because I don't think that's I don't think that's
Yeah.
correct. And they know that that's a natural and not a shameful in any way part of reading and growing your vocabulary and learning how to spell things. I think the we have to have the confidence, no matter what our reading ability or love of it or lack thereof is as adults. We have to be able to share that with students, and we have to model how to get through that. And I think it really helps them be able to do the same thing. Really, like, what 12-year-old is going to admit that they find something really difficult when the teachers, thinks that they're perfect or gives off the impression that they never make mistakes. I think we need to own the errors a little bit more than a lot of people do. But anyway, so you started with maths, moves to history, but you trained in both. You applied for the role of reading coordinator because you have very strong personal feelings and important personal experiences with reading that you wanted to share. So what does your role involve exactly? Like what do you do on a whole school level?
So there's certain aspects that are very much down to me in particular. So I oversee kind of like whole school approaches. So like Drop Everything and Read, Class Reader, which is like a tutor time initiative. Word of the Week is very much my thing. But I'm also in on those conversations with like the English department when they're having interventions and who they're intervening for, and then also our SEND department and how they're helping those kids that are really below age, and like how we're kind of trying to boost literacy overall. So it's meant to be a bit more of like a liaison role as well, and just kind of overseeing it all. Which I'm hoping to develop and become bigger and slightly more, I don't know, developed whole school for me over the long term. But it's quite a new role, so I think we're still trying to like fill it out a little bit at the moment.
Absolutely, and figure out what works particularly well for our particular students, and maybe what isn't as successful. So I don't know how you've found things. I mean, I said a little bit about this at the beginning, and we've talked about it. I feel like there are a number of students for a wide range of reasons that come into my classroom, and they will do the thing that we have to do because it's English class, and they'll like, if we're reading something that they know they have to do or that they're going to be assessed on or that is part of the lesson or the subject, they'll do it. It's not that they refuse to, look at words on a page at all, but the mere suggestion that they should pick up a book for their own, dare I say, enjoyment, like for any kind of leisure activity, it just sends them into this bizarre state of shock. So have you found that? Have you found that students are particularly averse to reading for pleasure or the idea of just reading a book that they don't have to read? Or is this just like, are they just trying to annoy me?
I have noticed it. And sometimes it's the kids that you don't necessarily expect. Like there's some kids that I can think of that I think just knowing their personality, you would think they probably aren't going to read, but they're probably one of the more avid readers and will happily get their book out and read whenever. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I just don't think they know how to pick a book that's going to keep them interested.
Yeah.
And I think they're too scared to say that.
Yeah. So I know because I've got 2 year 7 English classes in a year 7 form, and at the very beginning of the year, whenever it was drop everything and read time. So we do this just for listeners in our school. We do drop everything and read for it's about 10 minutes a day. And the exact lesson that it happens on changes every week. So it's not the same lessons getting hit. It's on rotation. And the students in form or in lessons, the year 7s, when it was dear time, some of them would like really cagily pull out this thing from their bags and look really suspicious about it. And I'd go over and I'd be like, why do you look like you're about to rob a bank? What's going on? And they'd show me, and it would be a graphic novel, for example. And they'd say really quietly, like, Miss, can I read this? Does this count? And I was like, yes. Yes, of course it counts. It's a book. Look at the paper. Look at the words on the paper. It's a book. It's a book. Of course you can read it. And some of them were so surprised by this. I wonder if their their particular classes, their particular schools in primary were just not allowing them to have that kind of freedom. Like I got the sense that they thought even before they arrived here that there was such a thing as a good book and a bad book. or like a school appropriate book, an academic book, and a book that you should keep at home. Have you got that impression from any of them?
Um, Not that one, but I've had it more from a
Ah,
teacher perspective. So
oh,
I don't know
interesting.
if you might have noticed, but there's a massive spike in what I call spicy books.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they're personally age appropriate for some kids at school. There's like
Mm-hmm.
some scenes of a sexual nature, shall we say, as the films would say. And I just like when you see a 13-year-old reading a book that you know's got kind of graphic content in, I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be like the book banner, but at the same time, shouldn't be reading that.
I
So I
know, I
definitely
know.
have it from the teacher perspective of like, okay, and then
Yeah.
the parents have brought it, and I'm like, okay,
Oh my
if your mum
goodness.
knows that you're reading this content, I guess I can't stop you. Um,
Yeah, and I've had so many conversations. Not strangely, I haven't had that here. So at our school, I haven't seen very many of those. The ones I've seen, the only books actually that that I know that I've seen anyway that I know have some vaguely possibly inappropriate content are like adult book. They're like adult novels, like for example, adult crime novels that some of my year nines read because that's what they like to read, and they're extremely good readers, and they've
mm,
probably read everything in the library 15 times. And I've actually borrowed them because I was looking at it one time, and the kid was like, "Miss, you can borrow it when I'm done." I was like, "Yes, please." So we did that like 3 times. So I read 3 of these kids just whatever crime novels they had, and there was the odd there was some language and there was the odd scene, nothing too super graphic, nothing I had to ring home about, but there hasn't been anything. There hasn't been anything else. But at my last school, which I wonder if this is why, it was an all girls school, and the
mm.
kids would bring in the most ridiculous things, like what you were just saying. Definitely spicy books. Definitely spicy books. And there were a few kind of conversations, but you feel guilty about it because it's like I know I have to like remove this from you in my lesson, or I have to, you're in my form and I need to have a conversation with your parents. This is like a possible
No,
issue. But I really don't want to. I don't want to do or say anything that's going to
because they're
discourage you from
reading,
reading.
and
I
it's the thing.
know.
It's like they don't like some of the kids I think of in particular. They don't get, bless them, much right around school. But the one thing they are
Yeah.
getting right is reading, and I really don't want to pick that battle with them
I know. I
because I'm
know.
like, you're actually reading, you're enjoying it. I can have a conversation with you about it, and
Yeah.
like it's the most engaged I actually find you
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's I think where I'm finding a lot of barrier at the moment is like where like the line of
Hmm.
like, so I'm actually going to write a little bit of a list so that teachers and former tutors can be aware of like these are sort of books some people are reading around school, just
Yeah.
so you as an
Just
adult
keep an
we
eye.
know the sort of content
Yeah.
that some of the kids are getting into.
And there was when a certain book, the first of a series that I will not name for a wide range of reasons, because
Yeah.
the for so many reasons I will not name it. Um, a certain book to do with certain hues of color, let's just put it that way, was first released. The explicit nature of that book obviously intrigued a number of people, including a number of our year 8 girls at the school. And there was a spate of this book appearing. Like these kids would pull this book out of their bag for
Oh God.
reading time, and we're like, that's so far across the line, it's unbelievable. Confiscate. Thank you very much. So we had, at one point, we had like 3 different copies of it just sitting in the English office that we confiscated from kids. It's just the most ridiculous thing. Like, I will draw the line there because it has also has absolutely zero literary merit, and I feel no guilt whatsoever taking that away from anyone.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. But it's tricky because we have these ideas of what a good book is and what an appropriate book is. Their parents might have different ones. They might have
Hmm.
different ones. They're coming with all of these societal influences of what they should be reading. And I remember teachers telling me when I was in school, like, you're such a good reader, you should be pushing yourself, you should be reading this, and this. And I was like, well, I do want to do that, but I also just want to read this stupid little thing that I want to read. Like, let me read what I want to read. Don't force me to. It
Yeah.
just ruins it for everyone. It's
I
really
agree, and as an
difficult.
adult, you're going to pick what you want. Like, I will hold my hands up and I will say, I'll read, like, a classic, like To Kill a
Hmm.
Mockingbird. And then the next
Yep.
week, I might be reading, like, a really, like a young adult novel that the kids would be reading, like
Yeah.
by one of my favourite authors at the moment is Holly Jackman, I think it is, like the Good
Mhm.
Girls Guide to Murder series.
Mhm. Oh yeah, we talked
Like
about
that
that. Yeah.
basically is like,
Yeah.
so I even
I
read the
love
kids
a
appropriate books.
silly little. Yeah, I love a silly little something I can read on holiday, but that's not the extent of it. But if that's all they want to read, then for goodness sake, just let them read. And I feel like the more we force, the more Anywhere forces students to narrow their vision of what an acceptable book is or what they should be reading, the more resistance we're going to get. So to me, one of the most important principles is like just read something, read anything. And there have been all these studies. I think there was one really recently that showed, as far as I understand it, my understanding of that was it was seemed pretty conclusive that children learn better when they're reading words off paper than when they're reading it off a screen. They remember it better, they understand it better. There's just something about like holding a physical copy on paper that it just gets into your brain better, to be really scientific about it. And so I don't actually care what the paper is. I mean, I used to I got to a point a couple years ago where I was picking up extra copies of the Metro when I was commuting across London to throw at kids that hadn't brought a reading book. So I was like, I don't care. Just it's words on a page. Just read it. Like flip until you find an article that you enjoy. There's got to be something in there. Turn to the sports section. I don't care. But anyway, we will continue this in a moment and hopefully share some other ideas of specific strategies that have worked and maybe haven't been so successful in to encourage students to read.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC reports on proposed changes to sex and relationship education guidance for schools in England. According to the report on the news website, government sources have told the BBC about the plans, which include banning sex education for under 9s, as well as additional guidance for teaching about gender identity. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the new guidance would ensure children were not exposed to disturbing content. Teachers have responded with concerns that some of the guidance appears contradictory and say there is no evidence of a widespread problem with current guidance. The new plans say secondary school pupils will learn about protected characteristics such as sexual orientation and gender reassignment, but makes it clear that schools should not teach about the concept of gender identity. It said it was right to take a cautious approach. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, speaking on BBC Breakfast, said biological sex is the basis of relationship, sex and health education, not these contested views. ASCL's General Secretary said that it was important that banning the teaching of gender identity did not shut down discussion, and that young people must be able to discuss this without their teachers feeling in peril of saying something wrong. The new guidance also strengthens rules to make it easier for parents to access teaching materials to see what their children are learning, although many point out that this guidance is currently in place. Lucy Emerson of the Sex Education Forum said, "If topics were to be restricted, it will leave children even more dependent on getting answers from online sources." The draft guidance is now open to a 9-week consultation, but once finalised will be statutory. An outline of the proposed new age restrictions can be found on the BBC News website and the consultation on the Department for Education website. In the United States, pro-Palestinian protests at colleges and universities have made the news again, as some graduates from Duke University in North Carolina staged a walkout. The protest came just prior to a speech by veteran comedian Jerry Seinfeld, who was due to receive an honorary degree. Mr. Seinfeld has been a vocal supporter of Israel since the 7th of October attacks by Hamas. Some students stayed to hear the speech, but videos posted on social media also showed some booing and chanting slogans in support of Palestine. Whilst the ceremony at Duke went ahead, plans at other universities, including Columbia and the University of Southern California, have cancelled or restructured their main graduation ceremonies to avoid further complications. The Daily Mirror features comments from Strictly Judge Shirley Ballas about free school meals. She focuses on her own experiences of being raised by a single mother and says she understands what increasing numbers of British children living in poverty are going through. She recalls looking forward to her free school meal, referring to it as a nice lunch every day. At 63, Ms. Ballas is hoping to use her experiences to highlight the issue of poverty by being part of an ITV documentary called Kids in Poverty. According to the Mirror, 4.3 million children in Britain get their only meal a day at school. 30% of UK children are living below the poverty line, with 1 million classed as being in extreme poverty. Figures from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation say that the share of children living in absolute poverty has increased by 148% since 2017. And is at its highest level for 30 years. The documentary can be seen on demand, and full details of the article from the Mirror are on its website. Finally, students at Lancaster University have voted for all food served on campus to be plant-based, according to BBC Radio Lancashire. The Students' Union is supporting the gradual transition to 100% vegan menus, with a target of 50% by 2025 and 100% by 2027. A campaigner told the BBC that Lancaster University has a goal of net zero by 2035 and that implementing a plant-based catering system aligns with this goal. The Countryside Alliance said too few students had been involved in the decision, with 18 of the 19 delegates on the Students' Union Council, who do represent 13,000 students, voting to support the motion. But the Countryside Alliance called it an attack on freedom of choice and said the decision should have been put to a wider student vote. Universities including Stirling, Warwick and Newcastle have also voted to go plant-based, although Edinburgh rejected the plan. The votes have been organised following Animal Rising's Plant-Based Universities campaign. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Interesting news bites there, considering we've just been speaking about students being exposed to disturbing content in the books they're reading, and lo and behold. Anyway, so Lauren, what do you think students need in order to help them pick a good book? Because you mentioned earlier that a lot of students probably don't know how to find the right book for them, and that's why they're resistant to things like Drop Everything and Read, because they don't actually know how to find one that interests them, and they're maybe too embarrassed to admit that or to ask for help. So have you helped a student with that, or do you have any suggestions about or experience about what works to help them find a book that they actually enjoy?
I think it's a difficult one because there can be so much variety, but I do think it comes down to like working closely with your school's librarian if you are lucky enough to have one, and kind of getting like posters or signs or something like, if you are interested in X, you might like Y. So,
Yeah.
like for instance, if kids are really interested in football, there might be some books that have characters or focus around football. Or if they're into games which are about shooting people, they might enjoy like these war books or something.
Yeah. And
And
I've actually seen posters like that, not in a school, but I saw I don't know if it was on Twitter or something, some other old person app, but it was a school that had, it might have been in the library, it might have been somewhere else in an English classroom or something, but they were posters that had a book at the middle, and it had other recommendations around it. Do you know what? I feel like now that I'm remembering this, I think it was actually a display that somebody created, or a series of displays that teachers created themselves. I don't think they were pre-made posters. So they'd have a book at the in the middle, and then a number of books around it. And, at the top or wherever it said, if exactly what you said, if, or like, for example, like Harry Potter, try these as well. Or
yeah,
like football, try reading these. And it was a really clear, visually attractive and incredibly useful way for students to actually see without having to ask anyone, or without having to spend ages looking something up only to be disappointed. It was just like all right there. And I'm assuming all of those books that were on the display would have been in the library.
accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've
And
spent so long recently curating reading lists for students who have asked, like, because either they've asked or their parents have asked, and I've had conversations with the students and been like, okay, tell me about the last book you read, tell me about the last book you liked, and then I go and look it up, and then and then I research the book, and I'm just sat there thinking, like, why am I doing this for each individual child? This is a little bit absurd. So I mean, they said they're reading them. I know one of them came to school a couple days later and during our dear minutes, like during Drop Everything and Read, she was reading one of the books that on the list that I'd given her. But
that's
it would have been
amazing.
so much easier, I think, if there were pre-made resources that were all around and,
Yeah.
kept updated to reflect recent publications.
I think that's what we're
So
working towards. That is in the works for us, especially because we're quite lucky we got a screen that we can share in the LRC, and I think that's something we're going to start putting together as a display with, if you like this, try that.
yeah,
I think it's also, I think kids are so ingrained that they can't do things wrong, like, and they can't
yeah,
make mistakes. It's a bad thing to do. And
yeah,
I really encourage kids to just be honest and be like, if you don't like a book, you've read like 30 pages of it and you're not into it, there's no shame in being like, yeah, that's not for me, putting it back and trying another one.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
sometimes you just need to find that one book that I call like your golden ticket, that then is
Mhm.
like your kind of gateway into reading. Like for me
Yeah, you have to
personally,
find what you like.
I remember the book that set it all off massively for me was Twilight, really, because that was massive when I was in year 8, and I remember
Yeah.
reading it and being like obsessed with it, and then that's where I got like the real big bug for like reading, and I could actually read at that point by myself. Prior to that, I remember listening to like my mum, bless her, she used to get me like all the cassette tapes so that I could read along,
Oh,
because I loved Harry Potter, but I couldn't read it because it was too
yeah.
high for me. So like I just remember Twilight being the book that was the first time I was actually able to read a book that was age relevant, or what people deemed age relevant for me at the time, by
Yeah.
myself, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But again, it's just picking and choosing. Like even now, and I'm sure you agree, there's times when you like pick up a book that you think, yeah, I should like this, and you've read like, you know, 50 pages of it and gone, nah, no, this isn't
Yeah,
for
of
me right
course.
now.
Of course,
But
of course, of course.
and whereas we're okay with that because we're adults and we kind of understand that it's okay to be like, yeah, not for me. I don't think kids think that's an okay thing to do
Yeah,
sometimes.
a lot of them are just so constantly in fear, and that fear manifests itself in so many different ways in different
Mm.
students, but they're in constant fear of failing or being perceived to be failing, that they have no idea how to cope with that and how to
Mm.
like be okay with it, and realize that actually most of the things you see as quote unquote failures aren't actually failures at all, because they're so inconsequential, or they're valuable learning experiences, and like not instantly succeeding at something is absolutely fine. And if something doesn't go your way, and it's a low stakes life lesson. Okay, so you've learned you don't like this book. great. You're actually better off than you were before. Pick another one. And they're not, so many young people are not in a position, they don't have the confidence, I guess, to take that approach. So I think we need to constantly be getting that message across and helping them really realize that it is actually okay to put it down and not pick it up again if it's not for you.
Yeah. I think as well, there's also a bit of sometimes I also find that kids don't know themselves. So like if I'm trying to help them think of a book, because I've read quite a few now, obviously over the years, and I try and say like, what sort of thing do you like? What are you interested in? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, you must be interested in something. Like, what do you enjoy doing on the weekends? I don't know. And I'm like, you're not giving me anything here.
Or I get, what do you do on the weekend? I don't know. I'm on my phone. Oh, that's helpful. Okay. So what are you doing? Yeah. Watching TikToks about God knows what. But there's a lot of book stuff on TikTok. They're obviously just not looking at that.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that's where I got a lot of my recommendations from nowadays is BookTok and stuff.
Yeah.
And I find that quite nice. And like, again, that's where I see a lot of the comparison ones from as well. So if you like this, try this.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah. Maybe that's another way forward. Maybe we need to, find a way to kind of harness that energy or use that without coming across as troglodytes or trying to be down with the kids. I don't know.
Oh God, heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. So some other things that we do at our school, we've talked about Drop Everything and Read and the kind of problems that come with that if students don't have a book that they're comfortable with or that they want to read, or if they're struggling to pick
full
one.
Stop.
Yeah. But you get the ones that are just sat there staring at a page and clearly not actually moving their eyes along the lines until the 10 minutes are up, until they can put it away. So, I have a bookshelf in my classroom, but I kind of gave up many years ago deliberately stocking the bookshelf with books because every time I did that, they would slowly disappear. And I didn't mind because, if a 13-year-old is going to steal a book because they want to read it and they took a book from the classroom because they really want to take it home and read it, like, do you know what? Awesome.
Go for it.
Great. Take it. So I stopped, for the sake of my bank account, kind of restocking that. But I feel like in general, secondary libraries need more investment. Like we need more funds specifically for libraries. And I think maybe part of that could be, especially if you have a school that does things like Drop Everything and Read, classroom libraries. My last school had this wonderful setup where every classroom had a shelf. It was literally one or two shelves. And I do mean those narrow shelves that you get in primary schools. So all the books sit facing forward so you can see the full cover. Like a couple of those really narrow shelves. You could only fit realistically 6 or 8 books on it if they were small books. And they were all relevant to the specific subject that was taught in that classroom. So you'd go in a science room and there would be science-based books. There would be, some factual, informative ones. There would be a biography of a scientist. There'd be a whole range of ones for all different ages, but they'd be something scientific. You'd go in the media studies room and there would be books to do with film production or, things like that. And I thought that was really cool, but we had the same problem, despite putting stickers on things, they disappear. But again, do you know what? I feel like we have bigger problems. So that was really cool. And I feel like that was really effective. Maybe that's something that more schools could be doing. But again, so much of it comes down to money, right? Like where are we getting this from?
Well, this is the thing, because there's sometimes no such thing as a literacy budget. And when you think of how important that is in a school, it is a bit like, okay, well, we need money to be able to do stuff to an extent. There's only so much that you can do with the resources you have, but there's no actually money put aside for it or thought for it a lot of the time. It's kind of just what there is sometimes.
Yeah. And then there are the kind of less less costly things that can be done. So we've got, this is reminding me, mine fell off my window ages ago and I haven't replaced it. I've not been very good. Oh dear. We have in our school, every teacher has a sign on their office or their classroom door or window that says, Miss or Mr. whoever is reading blank. And then you put in the book that you're reading at that particular point in time. And I haven't had one for a while. I need to deal with that tomorrow. Do you feel like kids have you noticed any response from students about those signs? Like, has it sparked any discussions or any questions?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like some of the kids have a conversation with me because I also write what number book it is for me that year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So like, I try and update it a bit more frequently than maybe some other people do, because I do kind of keep it as a bit of a live tally, just because I like kind of having that flex of being like, yeah, I've read 30 books already this year.
Yeah.
Not bad. So I think it has given some conversation, especially if a kid recognises the book.
Yeah.
I think that can be something you can bond over. And like, there's some kids that I maybe haven't taught since I taught them maths a couple of years ago now, that I still see around school, and we might stop and just have like a little bit of a conversation about books, because that's something we bonded over. Because doing things when, like with Dear, I would walk around and I would like ask them about the book, or like when they're doing the work and the book was on the table, if I like the cover, I pick it up and read it, like the blurb,
Yeah,
and
I
see if
do
it's
that as
something I
well.
wanted
Yeah.
to love doing. I'm like, I'm just being nosy, sorry, excuse me for a minute. But also from them seeing it on my door, they've had a conversation with me, and like it's gone like, oh no, I haven't read that. Like
Yeah.
Ali Hazelwood is an author that I talked to about with a particular people in year 10, and they're always asking me, oh Miss, have you read the new one? And I'm like, oh no, not yet, it's on my to-do list. But it's just something like, I don't teach this kid, but whenever I see them in the corridor, we do have like a little
Oh, that's really
moment
cute.
over a book, and that just makes me really happy.
That's so good. See, I need to use it more like that. When it was up, I either forgot about it for weeks on end, or I was using it to reflect my mood and just writing some random thing. Like I was in an absolutely foul mood one day and wrote, it was like, what is Miss reading? Miss is reading The Art of War. It's just like, the kids came in, because I put it smack in the middle of the window, and one kid came in and was like, Miss, what is that book? And so I got to talk about it, but it was more of a Miss, are you okay kind of comment than a, oh, do I want to read this? Like
This book sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. All right, just going to take a quick break and we'll be back to share some more literacy and reading top tips.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
So we have a few more whole school initiatives at our secondary school that we haven't yet really gone into. So Word of the Week is something that I don't think is well, it's not geared at, getting kids to pick up a book like so many of them seem absolutely terrified to do, but it is geared at improving literacy around the whole school. And my previous school did this as well. So, and even my school before that also had a kind of different version of it. We didn't have word of the week. We had wow words that we'd use for particular units, and they would be like on all of our PowerPoint slides to try and encourage, like we'd explain it at the start and then we try and encourage them to use those words as much as possible. But the word of the week whole school initiative, why don't you summarize that in case anyone's not familiar with it?
So it's just to kind of widen the kids' vocabulary, in particular tier 2. So tier 1 is hopefully words that they would use relatively frequently and confident know how to use, and then the tier 3 is like the academic terms that we use per subject, and it's very specialised. But it's the tier 2 that they struggle with, and they're the ones that they need to know to be able to access exam questions and to access quite a lot of stuff. So the idea behind it for like in particular our setting is that we're introducing to these tier 2 words that ideally they should know to, like, you know, broaden their vocabulary and stuff, but just in a calm kind of environment. It's done quite, I like to think, informally in tutor time, where they go through the definition, and I kind of based it around the Freya model. So making sure they know what the word means, so its definition, antonyms and synonyms, so what they can use in exchange for or not to use in exchange for. To link it with our school, I also put the word in Spanish because that is a language that our school is teaching. And then I get them to include a sentence so they can have a go at practicing using it in the correct context. But yeah, it's just mainly to boost those tier 2 words, and I'm trying to use words that they might come across in their SATs or would have come across in their SATs. Just as like a bit of a structure for it and a basing for it and where it's grounded. That's like the idea behind it. It's just like expanding their vocabulary, because there's no point pushing reading if they don't have a wide basic vocabulary to an extent.
Yeah, and we do what my other school did as well. So every time a student uses the word of the week, obviously in that week, in a lesson or when speaking to a teacher, we give them a positive point, like an achievement point, on our particular system, and it has its own button that we click, so they're recorded specifically as word of the week points, which is quite nice. And I know a lot of the students tend to, you know, forget about it or not care necessarily, but there are an awful lot of students that are really, really keen to get those positive points, and they will try and fit those words into every possible scenario. I don't know if you found this as well, but definitely in English, we get kids like using the words in the most ridiculous out there situations, like to the point that I'm constantly having to say, you know, I admire your ambition. And I love that you're trying, but let me rephrase that slightly so it works a little bit better for you. And then I'll get them to, you know, say it again, try again, and then I'll give them the point for it. But yeah, they're super keen. Some of them are super, super keen. Which is really cute.
Quite a fun interaction with my year 12s actually. I love my year 12s. They're quite switched on, and they like having a bit of a joke. And so I was going through what the next terms, because I prepped the words a term in advance so that the staff can know and they're aware of what's going on, so they can, because we try and plan it into some of our lessons so we can embed it so it's a bit easier for kids to use them. So I was going through them with my year 12s just to see what they thought of them, and one of them kept using it like the same sentence but obviously structuring it around the keyword, and it was just quite this person quite into politics, like quite a political statement. And it was just funny watching him like tweak the sentence to fit every single word that I was giving him. So it's like even like the older kids in year 12 are really like, some of them do enjoy using the word of the week, and they find it quite fun still to try and use it and engage with it, which is nice to see that it's not just, you know, the lower years, like even our higher years are enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, if you turn it into a game, it could get pretty funny pretty quickly, which is, you know, why not? Absolutely, why not? Yeah, of course. It's great. And the other thing that we do during form time, that is a little bit more reading focused, is
Mm.
the whole class reader. So
Yes.
what's the kind of logic behind that? What's that about?
Okay, so this is very much my baby, so I'm a little bit precious over it. So
Oh,
last year, it was slightly different, but I would say this is like the revised version of it this year. But last year,
hmm
Key Stage 3 had a single book. So, for
right.
instance, Face by
Yeah,
Benjamin Zephaniah, I think it might have been. I'm not sure
yeah.
actually off the top of my head. And you would read that for the whole year. Um,
Okay.
and then Key Stage 4 had extracts, but it would be a new extract every week. And
Right.
personally, as a Key Stage 3 tutor last year, I found that picking up that book, I couldn't remember where we got to. Like, I knew what page we were on,
Yeah.
but I couldn't remember in the story where it was. And I was a bit, I couldn't remember like the plot and where we were and what had happened. And it was really hard to
Yeah.
build that kind of like engagement, enthusiasm, and tension
Yeah.
while trying to read this book. And if I couldn't remember, how could I expect my kids to remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found that quite frustrating. And then the Key Stage 4, like, I think the texts were just because it was different every week. It was a lot of work for myself to
Yeah.
like source this. And also, I don't think
Yeah.
they could engage with it properly. So,
hmm
reflecting on that, I said this year that I wanted to do the class readers and base it around reciprocal reading and the 4 strands. So, predict, clarify, question, and then summarize, which are 4 skills that you need to be able to do to effectively engage with reading,
Right.
especially like as they get higher up the school. So with that in mind, I was like, great, 4 strands. There's 4 weeks in a month. I can
Uh-huh.
see this lovely pattern forming, which is where I kind of got the idea of like, okay, each year group's just going to have an extract, whether it's a book, a clipping from an article, or something that they're going to look at. So it's just one document every month, so the kids can
hmm
become familiar with it, and they're just going to focus on the different strand each time. And then to make it a bit more like what, like getting a bit more cultural capital. I always say that the wrong way around though, so I don't know if I said that
No,
right.
that's right. That's
Um,
right.
I don't know. Um, I've kind of looked
Oh,
at.
Lauren, you sorry, can you just say that last sentence again? Because your sound just went a bit weird.
Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
to kind of build the cultural capital of the kids, I've looked at key events throughout
hmm
the year to link it that they should be aware of. So, like for instance, October is Black History Month, so our extracts are
Yeah.
from Black female authors. So
Yeah.
again, trying to build that connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just different forms of reading, but also working on key reading skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, I
And
probably
I
spoke a
think,
bit too much.
no, 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 that's exactly what we need. We want to hear. And I think that what you said about the word of the week being quite a relaxed, no pressure, form time activity. I feel like the whole class reader is as well. And I like the fact, I think the kids appreciate it as well, that it only, each extract only lasts for the 4 weeks. So it's something fresh, it's something exciting, but it's also, you build that familiarity for a bit of time without it dragging out too much. Like I do think it's working quite well. And it is nice to just, it's nice to just sit down and like read to them. And sometimes I get them to read, and sometimes I read to them, and they like it. We mix it up. It works quite well.
Yeah.
Um, and it does get them thinking. And there's always the final activity, or the final thing is usually a summary
hmm
task. So, summarize this in, summarize what's happening. And I always give them a word limit, and now they have to fill in a particular box in the booklets we've got. So they fill this in a page in their booklet every time, every week that we do this. And so they've got a box to fill in. And I said, you can't write ridiculously small, and it has to fit exactly within the box. And if you can summarize, like I give them random parameters, and like, if you do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and it's an accurate summary, you'll get however many positive points.
Yeah.
And they're obsessed. They're obsessed with getting that correct. So
Okay.
it's, a little bit of carrot dangling can be effective as well.
Oh,
As long as there's
100%.
no kind of, as long as there's no negative as long as there's, no consequence for it going horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So it is almost 10 p.m. So thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on and sharing what you've done and your experiences, and letting me vent as well about how frustrating it all is. So it's been really informative, I think, and should be helpful to some people. And just once again, if anyone is listening to this before 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 21st of May, there is a show on Teachers Talk Radio by Reading Solutions UK about the necessity of reading to open up the curriculum. So they'll be talking about a lot of the things we were about, how reading and literacy is super important, and how students need to be able to do these things and value these things to be as successful as they can be. So thank you again, Lauren. Thank you so much. And
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I hope everyone has a lovely night, evening, afternoon, morning, whenever.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.